Welcome. This is where we conduct a thorough examination of complex stories. We take all the sources we can find, the research, the biographies, the accounts, and we try to extract the essential knowledge and insights.
Our goal is to give you the full picture and to do it quickly, accurately, and with all the necessary context.
Today we're analyzing a story that is, well, it's difficult, it's sensitive, and it's a story that is profoundly necessary to understand.
We are talking about the brief life and the tragic end of Dorothy Stratten.
Her narrative played out so intensely in the public eye over really barely 2 years. It's a harrowing look at soaring ambition, extreme exploitation, and ultimately lethal control.
We're focusing on her path as a Canadian model and actress, her troubled marriage to a man named Paul Snider, and the relentless pressure she faced.
And of course, the devastating murder-suicide that ended her life in August of 1980. She was only 20 years old.
She had just achieved this tremendous public success. She was Playboy's Playmate of the Month and, just before her death, named Playmate of the Year.
And, given the nature of this story, it deals directly with domestic violence, with obsession, with murder. It is vital that we stick rigorously to the facts, to what's been documented across all the source material.
And to always maintain empathy for Stratten. Our mission here is really to synthesize the timeline, to try and understand the specific pressures of her environment, and then to examine the lasting cultural and legal fallout that followed her death.
The structure is so important here because of the compressed timeline of it all.
It's incredibly compressed.
So we're going to chart her origins, her rapid breakthrough into Hollywood, and then focus intensely on the specific events that led to the catastrophic breakdown of her marriage.
And that leads us to the detailed account of her final critical days. We'll conclude with her controversial and really her enduring legacy in popular culture.
That compression you mentioned, it's maybe the most striking part of this. Her entire successful public career spanned less than 24 months.
Less than 2 years. The intensity of her professional achievements and the implosion of her marriage, they happened almost at the same time. Each phase just seemed to accelerate the other.
The sources give us a truly a granular look at this rapid, tragic descent.
They do. So let's start at the beginning.
Let's do that. Before the modeling world really took hold, Dorothy was born Dorothy Ruth Stratten in Vancouver, British Columbia in 1960.
Her parents, Simon and Nellie, were Dutch immigrants. She had a younger brother and also a sister, Louise, who becomes important later in the story.
By 1977, Dorothy is 17. She's attending Centennial High School in Coquitlam, and like a lot of teenagers, she's working a part-time job.
In her case, at a local Dairy Queen, and this is where she met Paul Snider.
The sources are very clear about who he was. Snider was 26, so nearly a decade older than her.
And his profession was listed as a Vancouver area club promoter and also a pimp.
Her classmates, when they were interviewed later, they painted this picture of a sweet, kind, and relatively normal teenage life right up until that point.
Yeah. Friends described her social circle as a very cool group. But the moment Snider entered her life, that path just deviated so sharply.
His entire professional dynamic, which was based on control and monetizing women's bodies, it immediately began to translate into his relationship with Stratten.
Oh, absolutely. Snider didn't see a girlfriend. He saw an opportunity.
Right.
And that professional push came very, very swiftly.
In the summer of 1978, he arranges for professional nude photographs of Stratten to be taken.
And then he sends them off to Playboy magazine.
This step immediately brings up a critical legal issue, one that really speaks volumes about the control dynamic that was already at play.
The age issue.
Exactly. In British Columbia at that time, the legal age of majority was 19. Stratten was only 18 in the summer of 1978.
So for Playboy to use the photos, specifically for that model release form to be legally binding,
She had to persuade her mother, Nellie, to sign the consent form for her, for an underage Stratten.
And, that's just such a foundational piece of this story. The very first official steps of her career required getting around established legal protections for young adults, and it was all driven by Snider.
It was. And within months, in August of 1978, Stratten leaves Vancouver for Los Angeles. She'd been chosen as a finalist for the 25th anniversary Great Playmate Hunt.
And Snider, seeing his investment paying off, he follows her just 2 months later in October of 1978.
The streamlining of her public identity started right away. Her long surname, Stratten, was professionally shortened to Stratten.
Her momentum from that point was just undeniable.
She was selected as Miss August 1979, and she started working immediately as a bunny at the Playboy Club in Century City.
And then in June of 1979, the month before her centerfold was even published, she married Snider.
A marriage that, as we'll see, became both a marker of his control and, according to some of the sources, a kind of defense mechanism for her.
It's a complicated dynamic, and critically, Hugh Hefner and the whole Playboy organization, they had massive expectations for her.
Right. The sources cite Hefner anticipating that Stratten had the potential for, and this is a quote, meaningful crossover success as an actress.
So this wasn't just another playmate in their eyes. She was seen as a genuine Hollywood commodity, a potential star.
And the acting work came almost instantly in 1979, confirming that promise. She grabbed small roles very quickly.
There was an uncredited appearance in Americathon, the roller disco comedy Skate Town, USA, and then a starring role in an exploitation picture called Autumnborn.
On television, she was making appearances on major shows of that era, like Buck Rogers in the 25th Century and Fantasy Island.
The speed at which she accumulated these credits all within a single year, it speaks to her drive, but also to the machine she was now part of.
But that rapid professional acceleration was running headlong into the escalating danger of her marriage.
And the source material is very explicit that this tension was visible to everyone around her.
Yeah, the early warnings are a really critical theme in her story. Multiple Playboy employees, her friends, including another playmate, Roseanne Caton, they all reported trying to caution Stratten about Snider's behavior.
His behavior was described as erratic, as troubling.
Hefner himself recalled trying to warn her about Snider, though he did admit he was in a tough position to do so.
And that raises a really important point about the nature of Stratten's environment. While these warnings were, likely sincere, they were often coming from the very people and the very institution who were simultaneously monetizing her image.
Right, and accelerating her separation from her previous life.
Which inadvertently increased her dependency on the one person who had brought her into that world in the first place, Paul Snider.
It creates this vicious cycle. Snider pushes her into the fame, making her reliant on his management and his network. But once that fame arrives,
the people supplying the fame see Snider as a liability and try to separate him from her. The conflict was baked into the foundation of her career from the very beginning.
As 1980 began, Stratten's career trajectory just became impossible to ignore.
And this professional success acted like a stress test on the marriage. It pushed the already fragile, controlling relationship past its breaking point. This is the phase where Stratten finally starts seeking some autonomy.
The major catalyst for that change was her casting in Zine. They All Laughed. It was a romantic comedy directed by the established filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich.
Stratten flew to New York City on March 2010, 1980 to begin production, and this was a completely different level of opportunity for her.
This was her fifth feature film, but her first substantial role in a big-budget picture, and she's co-starring with John Ritter.
Now, prior to this, Snider had essentially functioned as her shadow.
He was everywhere.
During the shooting of her previous movie, A Galaxina, she was still close to Los Angeles. Snider had assumed the roles of her chauffeur, her acting coach, and her ersatz manager.
The sources document his near-constant presence on that set. It was coupled with almost daily arguments he would provoke with Stratten, causing her immense professional stress.
And that detail is so crucial for understanding the control dynamic. Snider wasn't managing her career in a supportive or professional way.
No.
He was managing her access. He was there not to help her succeed, but to ensure she remained under his immediate surveillance, subject to his approval, which, often manifested as criticism.
So when the New York opportunity with Bogdanovich arose, Stratten realized she needed distance.
She did. Snider, of course, insisted on accompanying her to Manhattan.
But Stratten managed to convince him to stay in Los Angeles. She told him, falsely, that Bogdanovich had closed the set to all but essential cast and crew.
And this small, calculated lie, it bought her the physical space she so desperately needed.
And she used that space immediately.
The day after she arrived in New York, she and the director, Peter Bogdanovich, began an affair.
The connection between them deepened very quickly, and there's a particularly telling insight from the sources here.
Bogdanovich was also writing the screenplay for They All Laughed, and he later revealed that he based the unhappy marriage backstory of Stratten's character in the film on the personal details she was sharing with him about her own failing marriage to Snider.
The irony there is it's so powerful.
It is. She was literally playing a character trapped in an unhappy marriage while simultaneously living out the escape from her own.
But while she was gaining professional opportunity and finding new love in New York, the public accolades were still piling up back in Los Angeles.
Which just amplified Snider's feelings of abandonment and irrelevance.
The greatest public moment of her life actually happened while she was still filming in New York. On April 30, 1980, Stratten flew back briefly to California for her official unveiling as the 1980 Playmate of the Year.
This was a coronation. At the luncheon, she received the title and a staggering array of prizes, $200,000 worth of cash and gifts.
Hefner introduced her, praising her beauty, her intelligence, her sensitivity.
And Stratten, who was beaming, concluded her thank you speech by saying, "Hefner has made me probably the happiest girl in the world today."
And that very same evening, she was a major guest on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson.
That moment of immense public triumph, the culmination of the career Snider had engineered, was immediately followed by her final, definitive break from him.
This short trip back to L.A. marked the last time she would ever live in the home they had shared.
The conflict escalated very quickly after that Carson appearance. Stratten immediately began a 2-week promotional tour in Canada.
On that tour, she wrote a letter to Snider. She requested more freedom in their relationship.
Snider's response was, well, predictable. He telephoned her from Los Angeles in a blind, jealous rage that she was operating outside of his immediate authority.
The sources reveal a really heartbreaking detail about the end of that tour. Stratten returned to Vancouver, hoping for just a few days of peace with her family.
And Snider suddenly appeared, unannounced, in her hometown.
And he immediately leveraged his local connections. He coerced her into making personal appearances at various Vancouver nightclubs,
personally negotiating and pocketing the appearance fees before he returned to Los Angeles.
This action just reveals the extent of his monetization of her identity. He wasn't acting as a manager securing future opportunities.
No, he was exploiting her immediate market value for quick personal cash. It was all about reinforcing his financial control over her.
During his time in Vancouver, the couple had what was described as a particularly heated argument.
And the sources indicate the depth of Stratten's desperation to resolve the situation because she even offered a devastating concession.
She offered to give up her burgeoning acting career entirely.
To return to Canada permanently, just to salvage the marriage.
And Snider rebuffed his wife's attempt.
That rejection is so significant. It shows that his core issue wasn't the loss of a wife or even the loss of a traditional marriage.
It was the loss of control.
Exactly. The loss of control and the loss of prestige. If he had accepted her offer to go back to a normal life in Canada, he would have lost the celebrity status and the projected wealth he gained from managing a Playmate of the Year.
He rejected the wife to retain the manager role, even though that role was now, for all intents and purposes, purely fictional.
When he got back to Los Angeles, their contact grew sparse. And then in late June, right after what would have been their first anniversary, Stratten sent a second decisive letter.
They were now, in her words, physically and financially separated.
Snider's response was immediate, and it was punitive. He drained their joint bank account completely.
He was convinced of the affair with Bogdanovich, and he acted on that belief by hiring a private detective to gather evidence of infidelity.
We need to pause for a second on Snider's financial status, because it really drives his desperation.
Right. The sources note that Snider, as a foreign national without a green card, could not legally hold a regular job in the U.S.
He was relying entirely on Stratten's income, which was managed through her business affairs, just to support his lifestyle.
So when she officially cut him off financially, his desperation just accelerated.
To pay the detective and maintain his rapidly sinking lifestyle, he resorted to selling her valuable Playmate of the Year prizes.
At a substantial loss, just for quick cash.
The most public example cited in the sources was the $26,000 Jaguar Spurt scarf she had received. He just liquidated it.
By mid-July, principal photography on Stratton. They all laughed wrapped up.
Stratten and Bogdanovich returned to Los Angeles after a 10-day holiday in England.
And while Stratten officially maintained a newly rented Beverly Hills apartment as a front,
she had quietly moved into Bogdanovich's mansion in Bel Air. The formal separation was complete, but the physical danger was just beginning.
We're now moving into the final, critical 2 weeks of Stratton's life. This is a period the sources detail with harrowing specificity.
This phase is really characterized by Stratten's attempts at resolution and Snider's rapid descent into a focused legal preparation.
The immediate reaction from Snider was a documented act of planned violence.
On the night of July 31st, 1980, the day after Stratten got back to Los Angeles, Snider knew she was with Bogdanovich. he went to the director's estate.
He was carrying a borrowed handgun, and he hid outside in the shadows near the entrance.
His admitted intent was clear: to shoot anyone who emerged from the property.
After hours of waiting, he became impatient. He left, he drove up into the hills overlooking the city, and later admitted to a friend that he had contemplated suicide that night.
This was the first overt act of documented premeditation, a lethal indicator of his volatility.
The first face-to-face confrontation in 3 months happened a week later. It was around noon on Friday, August 8th, at Snider's West Los Angeles house, the place they had shared.
The sources say Snider went into that meeting supremely confident that he could still persuade her to come back to him.
Those hopes were quickly dashed. Stratten told him she had fallen in love with Bogdanovich and she wanted to finalize the separation.
A dejected Snider ultimately agreed to meet one final time the following week to discuss a monetary settlement.
So the meeting, while it was emotionally fraught, it appeared on the surface to be civil. It concluded with an agreement to part until the next negotiation.
And crucially, that very same afternoon, less than a week before the murder, Snider had to return the borrowed handgun to its owner.
The following 5 days, from August 9th to August 13th, become this chilling study of lethal determination.
They were defined by Snider's frantic, singular obsession with getting another firearm to replace the one he had just given back.
On August 9th, the day after the breakup was finalized, Snider took his private detective to a gun store.
But due to his foreign citizenship and lack of a green card, the store legally refused to sell him a firearm.
So Snider immediately asked the detective, his own employee, to buy the gun for him. He's asking him to commit an illegal straw purchase.
And the detective refused the request.
This situation really underscores the importance of his immigration status. The system prevented him from getting a weapon legally.
But instead of deterring him, it just forced him to seek illegal means, which speaks volumes about the depth of his intent.
The next day, August 10th, Snider grew more desperate, more volatile. He met the detective again and tried to persuade him to buy a machine gun,
claiming it was for home protection.
The detective, recognizing the severity of this request, managed to talk him out of that idea, which likely saved himself from some serious legal trouble.
But Snider was relentless. On August 11th, he tried to purchase a gun he found through a newspaper classified ad.
But the sources note that he got completely lost while driving out into the San Fernando Valley. Eventually, he just abandoned the search for that day.
This pattern, this methodical planning, combined with repeated failures and escalating requests, it paints a picture of a mind focused entirely on self-destruction and murder.
Finally, on August 13, 1980, he succeeded.
He purchased a used 12-gauge pump-action shotgun from a private seller he found through another classified ad.
And because this was a private sale, the legal restrictions placed on licensed dealers were completely circumvented.
That same evening, the morbid precursors began. In a conversation with friends, Snider mentioned the new gun. He claimed he was going to take up hunting.
But the conversation quickly devolved into something much darker and much more revealing of his intentions.
He brought up the subject of Playmates who had died unexpectedly.
Specifically mentioning Claudia Jennings, a former Playmate of the Year who had been killed in a car crash the year before.
He then made several profoundly disturbing remarks relating to the operational issues Jennings' death had caused, Playboy magazine.
He commented on how editors would sometimes pull nude photos of a dead Playmate from the next issue if there was time.
This wasn't just some morbid curiosity. This was a discussion about the logistics of death and celebrity image management happening just hours before he planned to act on that impulse.
This shift from talking about hunting to discussing the editorial cleanup required after a Playmate's death is such a chilling signpost.
It suggests he was calculating the impact of Stratten's death on the very industry that had facilitated her fame and, in his mind, his abandonment.
The final, fatal meeting was scheduled for the next day, Thursday, August 14th, around noon. Stratten arrived at Snider's West Los Angeles house.
She had spent that morning meeting with her business manager to finalize the property settlement offer. She brought $1,100 in cash, which was intended as a down payment for Snider.
Police later found it among her belongings.
And here is one of the most agonizing details in the source material. It's a moment of tragic irony that really speaks to the psychology of victims of domestic abuse.
Her manager logically suggested that Stratten delegate the rest of the negotiations, the separation, the divorce, the money, entirely to her lawyer,
to ensure her physical safety and avoid any further confrontation.
But Stratten refused the advice. She told her manager that the process would go easier if she dealt with Snider personally, claiming he was being nice about everything.
And in a truly heartbreaking final statement, she insisted, "I'd like to remain his friend."
That statement just encapsulates this deep human desire to maintain civil contact, to believe in the best intentions of a former partner, even when all the external evidence is screaming danger.
She was trying to negotiate the separation on human terms. She underestimated his capacity for violence.
While Snider was operating on terms of control and property.
Exactly. Snider's two roommates were conveniently absent, which left the couple completely alone in the house.
Evidence later suggested Stratten spent a short time in the living room. Her purse was found open there. Maybe she had just presented the cash before she and Snider moved into his bedroom.
The timeline of the discovery is specific, and it just adds to the horror of it all. By 8 p.m., both of the roommates had returned home.
They saw Stratton's car outside, and they noted the closed bedroom door.
They assumed the couple had reconciled and wanted privacy, so they spent the next several hours in the living room.
It wasn't until shortly after 11 p.m. that they finally investigated.
And only because they were prompted by a concerned phone call from Snider's private detective, who realized Snider had missed several scheduled calls. The roommates entered the bedroom and they made the discovery.
The forensic findings were brutal. Stratten and Snider were both killed by a single blast from the 12-gauge shotgun.
And both bodies were found nude.
The police timeline, which was derived from forensic evidence, indicated that Stratten was shot within an hour of her noon arrival at the house.
Snider committed suicide approximately 1 hour after the murder.
Which suggests a period of reflection or maybe final actions after the killing?
The news broke in the early hours of August 15th. Snider's private detective contacted the Playboy Mansion to inform Hefner,
who then had to place that horrific call to Peter Bogdanovich.
Bogdanovich, upon hearing the news, collapsed and required sedation.
Stratton's mother, in Canada, was informed later that morning by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It was just an abrupt and devastating end that immediately shifted Stratton's identity from a rising star to a victim.
Her remains were cremated and interred in Los Angeles. Bogdanovich selected her epitaph, a moving passage from chapter 34 of Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms.
And in a detail that really speaks to the depth of his continued devotion, Bogdanovich was interred right next to her remains following his own death in 2022.
Stratton's death, rather than closing the book on her life, ensured her permanent place in the cultural conversation.
But her memory became a battleground, and it was dominated by the conflicting narratives crafted by the men who survived her.
We have to first examine Peter Bogdanovich's intense, almost obsessive determination to preserve her work.
Right. Her final film, They All Laughed, which she had just completed, was released in August 1981, exactly 1 year after her murder.
And it performed poorly. It had a limited run. It was quickly pulled from theaters.
So Bogdanovich, who viewed this failure as a professional tragedy and an injustice to Stratton's potential, decided to take these extraordinary, desperate steps to rescue her final screen performance.
He personally bought the theatrical rights to the picture.
And this wasn't some cheap, limited acquisition. He paid out of his own pocket for a massive re-release and distribution across nearly a dozen major markets throughout North America in 1981 and 1982.
This determination, while, driven by love and grief, came at a staggering personal financial cost.
The sources indicate that Bogdanovich ultimately poured more than $5 million into distributing this film,
which was, at the time, his entire net worth.
This act of devotion, or maybe obsession, led directly to his financial ruin and eventual bankruptcy in 1985.
The sources note he specifically lost the Los Angeles home where Stratten had spent the last weeks of her life.
It's fascinating that this ruin was caused by an attempt to control her legacy. It echoes, in a far more benign way, Snider's obsession with controlling her life.
That's a powerful point. And despite the commercial failure, the artistic coda is that They All Laughed has since gained significant critical recognition. It's often cited as one of Bogdanovich's best pictures.
4 years after the tragedy, in August of 1984, Bogdanovich published the book that truly solidified this narrative battleground.
The Killing of the Unicorn. Dorothy Stratten, 1960-1980.
This book served multiple functions. It was a biography, it was a memoir detailing his affair with Stratten, but most powerfully, it was described as a scathing feminist attack on Hugh Hefner, the Playboy philosophy, and the entire organization.
And the core of the controversy revolved around a specific, damaging allegation concerning Stratton's first day of posing for the magazine back in August 1978.
Bogdanovich claimed that Hefner had sexually assaulted Stratten, who was then 18, at the Playboy Mansion.
We have to trace the evolution of this claim because the language itself became a point of legal contention.
Right. Bogdanovich originally used the word raped in the drafts of his manuscript.
But after Hefner threatened a massive lawsuit, Bogdanovich and the publisher subsequently altered that crucial sentence. They changed the word to seduced to describe Hefner's behavior in the final published version of the book.
Hefner, years later, publicly addressed the allegations. He confirmed a key detail that lent some credence to Bogdanovich's version of events, which was Hefner admitted that he and Stratten had taken a nude soak in the jacuzzi on the mansion grounds, which was the alleged scene of the assault.
But he vehemently denied forcing himself on her. He claimed they only hugged and said that his sexual interest ended once he learned she intended to get engaged to Snider.
The killing of the unicorn included several other major allegations against Playboy's treatment of Stratten.
Bogdanovich asserted that Stratten had only married Snider to block the sexual advances of Hefner, who Bogdanovich claimed pursued her aggressively after that purported assault.
He also claimed Stratten loathed nude modeling and generally resented dealing with Playboy. He argued she only tolerated the work because she saw it as a necessary, temporary humiliation required to advance her true goal, a serious acting career.
And finally, he made the direct charge that Hefner was partly responsible for inciting Snider's murderous rage.
This stemmed from Hefner banning Snider from the Playboy Mansion just days before the murder, a move Bogdanovich suggested Snider viewed as a calculated public insult designed to isolate him.
And Hefner's counter to that.
Hefner countered that the purpose of the ban was benevolent. It was simply intended to encourage Stratten and Bogdanovich to appear at the mansion as a recognized couple, thereby stabilizing Stratton's new life.
The media reception of the book was complex. While there was broad appetite for a critique of Playboy, the U.S. press gave Bogdanovich overwhelmingly negative reviews.
Critics widely questioned his newfound feminism, particularly given his own relationship with the married, much younger Stratten.
The reviews pointed out that Bogdanovich seemed oblivious to his own sexist susceptibility to the whore Madonna complex in his view of women.
And for you, the listener, who may not be familiar with that specific psychological term, it refers to a dynamic where a man compartmentalizes women into two mutually exclusive archetypes. The Madonna, who is pure, non-sexual, deserving of respect, and the whore, who is sexual, degraded, and not deserving of respect.
So critics were essentially arguing that Bogdanovich was attempting to elevate Stratten to the Madonna status, this pure artistic victim exploited by the predatory, whore-centric culture of Playboy,
while failing to acknowledge that his own actions, like pursuing a married woman or framing her career as a necessary humiliation, demonstrated that he also saw women through a restrictive, controlling lens.
The critique was harsh. One review from the Chicago Tribune was summarized with the headline, "Shabby little shocker."
Roger Ebert, while he was personally empathetic toward Bogdanovich's immense grief, stated that he understood the necessity of writing the book, but I wish he hadn't published it. He suggested the public presentation of the trauma did more harm than good.
All the while, Hefner consistently presented a counter-narrative. In public statements and documents following the murder, he framed his relationship with Stratten as a friendship,
positioning himself as a supportive, benevolent, paternal figure.
This image was intentionally reinforced the following spring when Playboy published Stratton's official biography, which sources confirmed Hefner personally supervised the editing of.
So Stratton's memory became split. The victim of exploitation and male control, or the talented girl whose father figure tried to guide her to success.
But both narratives were entirely controlled and written by the powerful men who surrounded her.
Despite the controversy over the narrative, her story was undeniably potent for adaptation. Her murder was quickly turned into two highly publicized films, solidifying her image in the public consciousness.
The first was the 1981 made-for-television movie Death of a Centerfold, the Dorothy Stratten story. This version was relatively quick, cheap, and focused on the facts, with Jamie Lee Curtis playing Stratten.
The far more influential adaptation was Bob Fosse's 1983 theatrical motion picture, Star 80.
Right. Starring Mariel Hemingway as Stratten and Eric Roberts as Snider, Fosse took a much darker, almost cynical approach.
The film wasn't just a biography. It was a deeply unsettling, fragmented portrait of American ambition, exploitation, and delusion, driven by Roberts' terrifying portrayal of Snider.
And the film cemented a specific, tragic public memory of Stratten as a pure casualty of the Hollywood machine. It's a striking coincidence that Mariel Hemingway's grandfather, Ernest, wrote the novel from which Bogdanovich drew Stratton's epitaph.
The entire story is just bound up in cinematic and literary tragedy. Her unrealized potential as an actress is frequently noted.
Film critic Vincent Canby praised her screen presence, even in her small roles, suggesting she might possibly have become a first-rate comedian with time and work. It's a sobering thought of what was lost.
Her memory also inspired a significant amount of music. The singer-songwriter Bryan Adams and his co-writer Jim Vallance dedicated The Best Was Yet to Come on Adams' 1983 album Cuts Like a Knife to Stratton.
There was also a song by Prism called Cover Girl.
And the references continue into later decades, which just demonstrates her lasting cultural impact as an icon of innocence lost to obsession.
The band Bush wrote their song Dead Meat in her memory, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers made a reference to her in their huge hit, Californication.
We have to conclude this segment with the final, highly unusual chapter in the Bogdanovich-Stratton family story.
In December 1988, Bogdanovich, at age 49, married Stratton's younger sister, Louise. She was 20 at the time.
The sources note that he had been financially supporting Louise after Dorothy's death, paying for her private schooling and modeling classes. They divorced in 2001.
And this action further complicates the narrative of Bogdanovich as Stratton's protective champion, while some saw it as an extension of his devotion to her memory.
Critics viewed it through the lens of that whore Madonna complex critique. They suggested he was attempting to recreate or possess the purity he lost with Dorothy through her younger sister.
Regardless of the interpretation, it remains a strange and defining footnote to Stratton's legacy.
This thorough examination of the source material reveals a story of tremendous potential. A young woman who had the talent, the ambition, and the drive to conquer a demanding industry.
Caught between powerful, controlling forces from the moment she entered the public eye.
The detailed timeline demonstrates that her success didn't bring freedom. It actually accelerated the catastrophic breakdown of her relationship with Paul Snider.
Her liberation, the ability to love who she wanted, live where she wanted, and control her own finances, was perceived by her estranged husband as the ultimate theft.
And his subsequent lethal preparation was methodical and terrifyingly focused.
Her courage to seek separation, despite the dangers she clearly recognized, led to the catastrophic conclusion engineered by Snider. Her life is a profound case study in how the intersection of early celebrity, sudden wealth, and obsessive jealousy can become lethally dangerous.
Particularly when it's underpinned by a pre-existing dynamic of control and exploitation.
Considering the extensive media coverage, the films, the songs, and the controversial books written about her, often penned by the very men who played defining roles in her life, whether as husband, lover, or mentor.
We are left with a final, provocative thought. In a world where celebrity victims are instantly commodified, how does the public ever truly discern the authentic voice and private struggle of a public figure like Dorothy Stratten, obscured as it is by the layers of narrative control imposed after her death?
It is a question that requires continuous critical thinking when examining any tragic celebrity story.
Thanks for listening.